Well, the state of Idaho and those within it have historically considered our independence, our freedom from the feds, a source of pride. Yet almost 2/3 of Idaho's land is owned and managed by the federal government. And that is something one of Idaho's congressmen would like to change and kind of bring those lands into the fold of the state, since the current lord of those lands is deeply in debt with priorities focused elsewhere. Earlier this week, Congressman Fulcher pitched a concept that got people across the state talking and arguing a bit. Joe Paris spoke with him about it and with those who think it's a bad idea.
A conversation reignited what to do with Idaho's vast collection of federal land.
Some of the Idaho legislators had sent the delegation a letter about the importance of keeping public lands public. And I agree with that, by the way. But it made me concerned that potentially they weren't aware of what's going on at the federal level.
Idaho Congressman Fulcher responded with a letter to leaders of the Gem State, a direction he believes Idaho needs to head in to manage millions of acres.
They don't have the resources to manage all that, and so they don't. And we get fallout, like about 1 million acres of wildfire as a result of that to a large extent.
The plan, move management to local authorities, Idaho ideas.
It's not necessarily a transfer of ownership. It's a transfer of management capacity. It's a transfer of the management responsibility.
Congressman Fulcher says he sees the writing on the wall. Federal funding like PILT and SRS that offset the fact that Idaho can't get property taxes on federal land surrounding its communities. These ideas are getting harder to pass in Congress.
My colleagues in the Midwest and the East, they think that's a subsidy to Idaho. It's a subsidy to the West, and they're right. But they're less and less willing to sign off on that.
My initial reaction was puzzlement.
But John Robison with the Idaho Conservation League shares concerns with other Idahoans about the concept.
Transfer of ownership of public lands to the state is a one-way street to privatization. That's the track record of our history. That's happening before our eyes with other parcels. And simply the state cannot afford to manage the American public lands within the boundaries of the state.
In his view, strengthening federal partnerships would make the current arrangement better.
The state of Idaho recently signed an agreement with the U.S. Forest Service about using the Shared Stewardship Program and an expanded Good Neighbor Authority. So we're using state resources to help manage public lands that belong to everyone. And it's these types of partnerships that we need to keep working on, not giving up and putting our public lands at risk of privatization and being sold off.
Concerns about blocking access to public land is one that Fulcher says he shares.
I've made the case to the president, I made the case to the administration that it's important for those of us in the West to maintain those public lands. But I think that the problem can be solved by controlling it and managing it locally.
There's no doubt that management of public lands can be improved. We all have our own ways where we'd like to see things improve and change. But working through a properly funded federal government, we can do those things.
What I want is what they want. It's just a matter of how you go about doing it. And by the way, with our friends who are in Forest Service, Department of Interior, BLM, I want them to keep their jobs. I just want them to be responsible to a state authority as opposed to a federal authority, because I think that's a more healthy long-term system that is sustainable. I simply don't think that the current system is sustainable.
And to be clear, this is just a conversation right now. There is no legislation drafted or anything being presented in terms of an action item, Brian. But it is a major conversation that is not a new one, as we highlighted in our public land special that you can watch on KTVB+.
And I know this plan is possibly years away, but if anybody looks at this and says, well, with the situation we're facing now when it comes to state budget, the quickest way to raise money, selling off land.
Certainly, and the congressman also made the point that with the national debt at the federal level so high, an easy way for the federal government to cash in would be to sell off public lands, federal lands, and cash into private donors. So this would be a way to, I guess, get in front of that.
All right. Thanks, Joe.